So, Trev, let's get into our keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense. This side of the ball has been the glue for this team all year. There's one game this year where they needed the offense to step up for them, and they did. And that's one of the reasons that Notre Dame is here today. That just so happens that it was their most recent football game. So it's not a key to victory, but I do think getting off to an early start is, where you're getting some stops and you're, not you're just not letting Indiana go up and down the field on you, I think is important. And we didn't include it in one of our keys, but as you think more about it, I do think there's some importance to this defensive football team having some early success to kind of get that USC kind of game out of their mind. I think that's at least worth noting here before we get started into the four keys that we established.
Yeah, I almost view it as getting back on track for Notre Dame's defense, right? Kind of that, you know what? It's almost kind of that prove it moment for them of like, okay, this was just a fluke. We were dog tired, like a lot of teams were, right? And just go out and get back on track. I agree 100%.
So let's get into the keys, the four keys that we did establish, Trevor. And look, as we've said all week, last week, to win these type of games, it's about your best has to be your best. And for Notre Dame, the best part of their defense is right up the middle, and it's the defensive tackles. And when they play well, teams have a very, very hard time moving the football, running the football, and doing much on offense. So key number one, it's an easy one. You've got to dominate right up the middle. That means big games from Mills and Cross. It means your backups have to play well because they can't play every single snap. So you're going to need Donovan Heinisch and Gabriel Rubio to play well also. And then, of course, your inside linebackers. Your defensive line can do their job, eat up gaps, but if you're eat up blocks, but if your linebackers are having bad fits or they're missing tackles at the line of scrimmage, doesn't matter how well your defensive line plays. It's got to be both levels. You're going to need Drake Bowen. You're going to need Jack Kaiser. You're going to need Jaden Alsbury, all to play well in this football game, including Jalen Sneed as well. They're going to have to also play well. You've got to dominate Indiana up the middle. When Maryland had success early, shutting them down, a lot of it came right up the middle. When Ohio State was dominating them, a chunk of that was coming up the middle. And then that allowed some of the edge stuff to happen because they had to spend so much time controlling the action up the middle. And then, of course, the run game. If they can't get a push in up the middle with their big veteran guards, their run game struggles. And so they're going to have to be very effective up the middle. Dominate up the middle, and you've got a shot to slow this Indiana offense down.
Notre Dame's defense has been at its best this season when they're strong up the middle. I think of games like Georgia Tech. I think of the game, the Louisville game where they kind of had their coming out party, especially the 2D tackles and Howard Cross and Riley Mills. You look at how dominant they were against Army, and then on the flip side of that coin, one of the issues for Notre Dame's defense against USC is they weren't that strong up the middle. I wouldn't go as far as call it a liability, but it wasn't what it was.
It wasn't dominant.
Right.
It wasn't dominant.
Right. And so when Notre Dame's defense is at its best, with as good as their secondary has been and as good as they've been out in space and with how fast we know this defense is, at the end of the day, when they've been able to dominate up the middle, kind of like almost like their personal identity as a defense, when they are strong up the middle, then you combine it with all of those other things. This is a really, really difficult defense to move the ball on. So I agree with you. All four of the defensive tackles that rotate in, maybe it could be more in this playoff game, who knows, but all four of the defensive tackles that rotate in and the interior linebackers up the middle need to have a really, really good game tomorrow night.
If Indiana comes out and tries to establish a run game like I think they're going to, I do. I think Indiana's going to run the ball and take shots. That's what I think their game plan is going to be. I'm going to have a couple of videos and breakdowns on the premium board where I'm going to take a couple pass concepts that I think that we're going to see from Indiana. And the first one that I'm going to do, Trevor, is their go routes, their outside go balls, the back shoulder throws. There's no way that offensive staff is going to break down the USC game and think anything other than, hey, we've got the guys that can take those shots as well. We've got to make sure we're doing some things along those lines as well, because they have a quarterback that throws a great back shoulder ball, and they have receivers that have shown the ability, as I'll show. This isn't like one game. I've got clips from the Nebraska game. I've got clips from the Maryland game. I've got clips from the Michigan game. I can show you clips from just about every game they've played this year where they've hit that throw and say, hey, this is something you got to be aware of. They do a lot of stutter and goes. They do slant and goes, right? The touchdown pass to Surratt beat the Michigan corner on number 20. It was on a stutter and go, stop and go. Michigan guy bit on it. He ran right outside of him, wide open for a touchdown. We've seen them do that stuff. I've seen them run out and ups, like old school out and ups, just like, look, 10-yard out, boom, up, those type of things. They're going to take their shots in this football game. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of it's going to be predicated on running the football at Notre Dame to set that up, to get those safeties down in the box. And that's going to present, I think, especially Drake Bowen with a lot of opportunities, and Jack Kaiser with a lot of opportunities to impact the run game positively or negatively. And if Notre Dame's going to shut down the run game, I think those two kids especially are going to have a lot of tackles in this football game. And they're going to have to play at their best football season, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they could do. Number 2, Trev, and this is incredibly important, and it encompasses so many different aspects of this game. The way Indiana coaches, discipline, but also smart, moving guys around, mixing up tempos. They're not a team that goes fast a lot, but they'll push it a little bit at times. They do a lot of movement, a lot of different formation groups. They'll go 11 personnel, they'll go 12 personnel. They'll mix things up a lot. They're going to try to do a lot of things to confuse you, to get you to make mistakes. As we talk about double moves, a lot of levels concepts. There's a play that they scored a touchdown on. It was very similar to the one Notre Dame scored on against Virginia, where they had a post-snap switch, and it looked like the guy was going to work out, and then he works back inside on the slant, catches it, Rourke hits him right in the chest. He goes in for, I think, about a 12-yard touchdown. They force you to make a lot of decisions, pre-snap and post-snap, with how they come at you. Requires discipline to be at a season high level, right? Season best level. You've got to be disciplined. That means don't allow them to out leverage you with their movements and their formations, right? You've got to see it and adjust to it. But also then don't overplaying the leverage, because sometimes they're doing that to get you to overplay it, and they're coming backside with a counter. Over adjust to the 2 tight end alignment, and then they're just going to run a counter backside, and they're going to log you and bounce it outside, right? It means don't fall for the double moves, right? Be disciplined in what you do. Yeah, come down on that out cut, but come down at an angle that allows you to take that out and up if they hit it. Don't fall for double moves, right? You can tell the difference if you're a well-coached defensive back between a guy's about to run a stop route, he's trying to get you to stutter so he can beat you. It's about properly handling the post-snap switch routes, right? There's got to be good communication. We saw against Georgia Tech and Leonard Moore's first start that there were some miscommunication moments in that game between him and the safeties and other positions that allowed Georgia Tech to hit a couple big plays in the pass game. You can't allow that to happen in this football game. You've got to be disciplined. And, of course, they're going to do a lot of misdirection, a lot of screen game, a lot of counters, a lot of using jet motions to try to get you one way and coming back the other way, trying to suck you down with their run action on an RPO. They're going to pull that thing and get it outside. Discipline is such an important part of handling this Indiana offense. And, honestly, not a lot of teams have been able to handle it for 4 quarters. We've seen teams like Maryland and Michigan State and Northwestern have some success early, and then next thing you know, it's big play here, big play there. And wow, we were in this game for a minute, and all of a sudden it's 21-7, 28-7, and now we're way down. And you're wondering how it happened, because they can score in a hurry, this Indiana offense. I mean, and like Nebraska was like dial a big play. I mean, it's just like every other play was like, okay, big play here, big play there, big play there, for a defense that otherwise has been pretty good so far this season. But they didn't have discipline in that game. So they ran a post-snap switch, and they turned the outside guy loose, and it was the easiest big play that Curtis Works ever. You know what play I'm talking about? They're going left to right. I mean, it's like that's the kind of stuff where it's like you can't have those kind of mistakes, because they will make you pay. And that's the best part of having Curtis Work, is he is really smart. And if you make a mistake, he's going to find that guy, and he's going to get the ball out there, and he's going to hurt you. And you can't allow that to happen. Discipline in this game is so incredibly important in all phases, Trevor. And I would argue it's every bit as important as key number 1, which is dominating up the middle. If not number 1, you could make a case that this should be the very number 1 goal for this football team in this game, is you've got to be disciplined.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that you had just said. The only other thing that I would add is being disciplined. The other thing that I would file under there is tackling well in space. That is something that Notre Dame has done extremely well all season long. When you go and you break down Indiana's offense, they have a bunch of guys that are really good after contact and after the catch. They have 2 running backs in Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, who they just don't go down. They're not shifty guys. They're not hurdling people. They just break tackles. And so you're going to have to bring your feet. You're going to have to form tackle. You're going to have, I mean, basically just put on a highlight reel of what Jaden Osbury did all season. And that's what the entire team is going to have to emulate, right? They have really shifty slot receivers. I think a lot of the attention goes to Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper for their big play downfield ability, which rightfully so, but they have three guys in Miles Cross and Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams who they look to get very, very active in the screen game. Their offensive coordinator does a really good job of getting the football into their hands quickly because good things happen when those three guys get the ball. They're very shifty. They're very quick. They run low to the ground. Like I said yesterday, they're kind of like a Jordan Faison, and they have three of them, and they're interchangeable, right? Sometimes when I was breaking down the film, I had a hard time figuring out the difference between Miles Price and Miles Cross. I know one of them's number 4 and one of them's 19, but they play very, very similar. So tackling well in space is going to be a must because, to your point, Bryan, they do a really good job of capitalizing on other teams' mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And what's one of the biggest mistakes that teams make against Indiana is not tackling well in space. That's how they keep drives alive. That's how 2-yard gains turn into 8-yard gains. That's how 6-yard gains turn into 15-yard gains. So tackling well in space is going to be a must.
It's funny. It's. I hope that the Notre Dame players don't overlook Indiana the way Notre Dame fans are. And you talk, well, you're talking up Indiana. I'm not talking up Indiana. I don't need to talk up Indiana. Guys, we brag about how Notre Dame won 10 of their 11 games by at least 2 touchdowns. You know who else did that? Indiana. Matter of fact, actually, Notre Dame won 9 games by 2 touchdowns or more, 10 by double figures, right? Indiana won 10 of its 11 games by at least 2 touchdowns. They didn't do that by accident. They didn't do that just because other teams just didn't show up that day. And it's just by chance, everybody played their worst game against Indiana. That's not how they got here, folks, right? So I'm giving you an honest assessment of who this football team is. That doesn't mean, there's this thing that some have, you can't say that another team is good or somehow you take it as an insult to Notre Dame. No, Notre Dame's better than Indiana. But that doesn't mean Indiana also isn't really good. They are very good. I'm not talking up anyone. I'm giving you an honest assessment of how a team can rank in the top 10 in scoring offense and scoring defense and be 11-1 and be in the college football playoff. It's not about talking anyone up. It's about being honest and not trying to convince you every week that the opponent sucks so you can feel better about the game coming up. It's an honest assessment of who they are. It's a good football team. And that's why they require you to be disciplined, because if you're not, they're going to hurt you. Now, lucky for us, I think that Notre Dame players are going to look at Indiana a lot more like we do and not how some people in the chat seem to be looking at Indiana, which is if they're Indiana. Guys, this is not 2023 and the previous 100 years before Indiana. This is a different football team. And this team has that past teams never had? Portal success, because it wasn't around until 2 years ago. It's a good football team. So we'll see how that one plays. But the next one, Trev, these last couple two go together. Let's get these in together. Number 1, you've got to get constant pressure on Curtis Rourke. Have to. And when you get to him, you've got to hit him and you got to take him down. Like Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, a little bit, not a ton, Michigan, those 3 teams had missed at least 5 or 6 chances in each game to get him down. One thing I saw in films, he's not overly mobile, but he's better at escaping sacks than people give him credit for. Not because he's an athletic guy, but he's smart. He'll see that pressure and just step up at the last second and make you miss. You stay on your track, and then boom, he just steps up and then you go by him. And he'll take off and he'll run every now and then, but more so what he does is, and this killed Northwestern, is he'll go step into the pocket, step back out, and then when your secondary comes up to tackle him, he just throws it right over their head for a big play. He has done that so many times in this game, in this season, where he'll step out of the pocket, you come up or lose somebody on and their receivers do a great job on scramble rules. Great job working open. And he'll find them. And you've got to be – so it's not just pressuring him, but it's pressuring him and make sure the ball gets out. Don't lose gap integrity. If you get to him, bring him down. If you can do that, and Ohio State did a great job of that after the first drive, and it completely shut Indiana down. But if you pressure him and he just slides out of the pocket and he gets free, he's either going to move the chains, or he's going to find somebody downfield for a big play. So you've got to pressure him early and often, get him out of rhythm. He is not a great quarterback out of rhythm because he doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't. He's a smart kid. He's an accurate kid. He's a great decision maker, but he doesn't have a big arm. And if you got him thrown off of his back foot, he's going to have a lot more incompletions. And then that ties into point 4, Trevor, which is get the ball. You're a great turnover defense. Get the ball. And he's been prone to early turnovers in the season. He threw 2 early picks against Maryland. If you can do that against him in this game, this is going to be a fun night for Notre Dame, right? Get the ball. Knock it down. That includes knocking it down, tipping it, doing all those type of things. But also, when those 3 or 4 potential turnover opportunities come up, you've got to get the ball. Michigan missed out on too many of those opportunities. Now, they had one where they picked them off inside the 10-yard line. They were coming out, picked them off inside the 10-yard line. They missed a couple other opportunities in that game, Trevor, that they could have got the ball. You can't miss on those opportunities, because if you give him second chances and third chances, he's going to hurt you. And so that's the big thing, is constant pressure on him, a lot of hits on him. And then when you get the opportunity to get your hands on the football, you've got to get your hands on the football. And when you get chances to pick the ball off, you've got to capitalize and pick the ball off. Those are my last 2 keys for the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, and I think that the constant pressure on Rourke, the way that you described it, I think bleeds perfectly into stay disciplined. When you're rushing the passer, don't come in out of control, right? Because Rourke is a good guy at gap escaping. He's a good guy at stepping up into the pocket and just evading pressure. He's really good at evading pressure. I like, not necessarily escaping it. It's not like a guy has him and he just stiff arms
He's
him.
smart. He's savvy.
Yeah. And he buys himself more time because he's a 6-year player. He knows what kind of player that he is. That's what makes him so dangerous. So if you're going to get pressure on him, make sure that you come in under control, right? Still be violent at the point of attack, but come in under control, because there have been a good amount of times this year, especially with linebacker pressure, that I've seen it be ill-timed. And when it is on time, there have been times where they just go in and blow right by the quarterback because it's not under control. And then for turnovers, defensive line, when Rourke goes back to pass, hands up. You have 6'6" Riley Mills. You have 6'6", 6'7" Bryce Young, 6'4" Josh Burnham. Like, get active hands. When Gabe Rubio's in the game, he's a 6'5" guy. RJ Oben is 6'3". So, you're going to have opportunities for tip balls at the line of scrimmage. And then for defensive backs, active hands, man. Be active, head on a swivel, because there will be a couple of tip passes in this game, and Notre Dame has thrived on those. But no, constant pressure on Rourke and getting the football. Like I've said the past 2 weeks, there is a direct correlation with the amount of sacks and the amount of pressures that Curtis Rourke takes and the amount of turnovers that he's susceptible to. He's also been sacked a couple of times where he's lost the football. Now, I think he recovered 2 of the 3 between the Ohio State, Michigan, and Maryland game. But you will have very, very, I guess you like, not easy opportunities, but you will have several opportunities that when you are sacking the quarterback, make sure you see ball, get ball, that kind of mentality, because he will lose it in the pocket. So, and recovering fumbles hasn't been something that has been like an overall strength of this defense, I would say, because early on in the season, a lot of footballs were hitting the turf and not a lot of recoveries were going to the blue and gold.
Well, I think, what did they miss on their first 8?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think their first 8 fumbles they did not get.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until Leonard Moore and it wasn't until Jaden Alsbury recovered the Leonard Moore forced fumble against Louisville that Notre Dame recovered their first one. And so what's interesting about that, Trevor, is they started off 0 for 8, but they ended the season 11 for 25, which means they recovered 11 of their next 17 fumbles that hit the ground on offense or on defense and special teams. And so, you got to get the ball. You've got to continue what you did in the last 7 games and not what you did the first 5 or first 4, right? And so that is one of the weirdest stats I've ever seen, right? And it was like, I think it was 2 years ago, right? Was it 2022, Al Golden's first year, that Notre Dame had like a really bad rate of recovering fumbles? Yeah, they forced 12 and only recovered 5 in his first season. And they weren't great at forcing turnovers. Last year. They forced 24 fumbles and only recovered 8 of them last season. So Notre Dame finished, let's see here. Notre Dame was tied for 5th in the country in forced fumbles, and they ranked 44th in fumbles recovered, which is a wild stat. This year, Notre Dame ranks 3rd in forced fumbles, and they rank 8th in fumbles recovered. That's got to continue in this football game. No question about it. So we're going to see. I mean, look, here's the deal. This is a very well-coached, well-schemed, smart, veteran, experienced offensive football team. Notre Dame is much younger. They are far less experienced, but they're much faster and they're more physical. That's got to be what carries the day in this football game. You've got to be aggressive. You got to take the fight to Indiana. They're going to make some plays. Rebound from it, go make a play the next day. They go off on a long play, Trevor, right? Because what are all these things built on? What is dominating up the middle? What is being disciplined? What is constant? It's limiting the big plays from the Indiana offense. They can't big play you to death. They big played Nebraska into oblivion in that football game. Maryland was hanging with them early, and then big plays, right? Michigan shutting them down early. Stop and go, bomb, Elijah Surratt with a touchdown, and they were in a little bit of trouble, right? They will big play you to death if you don't play discipline and don't do all those things. That's why you've got to be aggressive, take the fight to them, swarm to the football. If they go off for a 40-yard gain, a 40-yard pass, that's fine. Tackle them at the 12. Don't let them score. Then you've got your shot to kind of keep them out of the end zone, which is hard against this team. And that's where situational football comes into play. But like all the things we talked about, that's what leads to third down success. That's what leads to limiting big plays. That's what leads to all the situational things we could have given you for keys to victory. Those things are what stop those things. Dominating up the middle, being disciplined, getting consistent pressure on the backfield. Because if you're doing things that are allowing you to get to Rourke all the time, you're most likely also doing those things in running downs, and you're getting the running backs off their track. Because if their running backs are getting downhill, I've always said this, Trev, you want a running back to make his first move at least 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Because running backs don't want to make moves behind the line of scrimmage. They want to press, get to that aiming point, and then make a cut down the field, right? And when we talk about Notre Dame running backs, a lot of their big plays, except that one by Jadarian against Purdue, they have come when they're making moves on guys 4 or 5 yards downfield or on the perimeter. When you're making moves behind the line of scrimmage, you've now declared, I'm going this way, and they can rally to the football. All those things play together into those things and are keys for the Notre Dame defense to shut down this very talented and potent Indiana offense. And is it the most talented offense they've played all year? No, it's not. USC's got more talent. Louisville's got more talent. None of them are as good as this Indiana team is, because I don't know if either one of those teams are as good as Indiana's up front. I think that's a big part of it. Neither of them are as good up front as what Indiana has been this season. And so you're going to have your hands full, but it's something I think this team can accomplish, Trev, if they have the right mindset and the right attitude.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I'll add to keys is, and I've been preaching this for the last 2 weeks, winning the red zone on offense and defense, man. It's going to be a battle of, on offense, what's going to give first. IU's red zone defense hasn't been spectacular. Neither is Notre Dame's red zone offense. Complete and opposite storyline on the other side of the football. IU has scored more touchdowns in the red zone than any other team in college football by a lot. And Notre Dame does a really, they're a top 5 defense in the country in touchdowns allowed in the red zone. So once they get inside of the 20, because look, to Brian's point, everything that he's been leading up to, when you play this caliber of a team, once you get to the playoffs, it's not going to look like what Notre Dame's defense did to Stanford. Okay. Like, it's just not. That IU is a really good football team. They are. It's you don't make the playoffs if you're not a good team, right? So big plays are going to happen. IU is going to be able to drive down the field. Notre Dame's going to be able to drive down the field. It's not going to look like what happened in the regular season. As far as I'm concerned, both of these teams are 0-0, right? It's a new season, essentially. So if and when each team gets into the red zone, Notre Dame's going to have to win. That's going to be a huge key for me as well.